What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction and review of Alex Garland's latest film, Civil War. And just so you guys know, this video will contain some mild spoilers, so if you haven't seen this movie yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. Civil War is a dystopian film written and directed by Alex Garland. The film stars Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, Kaylee Spaney, Stephen McKinley Henderson, and Nick Offerman. Its plot follows a team of journalists who travel across the United States during a rapidly escalating Second American Civil War, which has engulfed the entire nation. Civil War had its world premiere at South by Southwest on March 14th of 2024 and was released theatrically in the United States by A24 and in the United Kingdom by Entertainment Film Distributors on April 12th of 2024. The film receives positive, so far, reviews from critics. In fact, at the time of the making of this video, the film has a very good 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's based on almost 200 critic reviews, with a comparable audience score of 86% based on over 100 verified ratings. It has a Metascore of 78 on Metacritic, and that's based on 47 critic reviews, with a user score of 7.2. Now, that's based on only 10 user ratings, but I'm sure that number will grow as more people go and see the movie, of course. And finally, it has a 7.7 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's with just over 4,000 ratings. So, first things first, I have to say, this film was not quite what I expected when I sat down in the theater, my popcorn and Slurpee in hand. Honestly speaking, I went to see this film expecting to see a war movie, or at least a movie filled with socio-political intrigue using a war as the backdrop. This film was neither. This rather expansive concept, cheaply exploited I might add, through the trailers and whatnot, that was essentially boiled down to a road trip film with a couple of photo shoots and shootouts sprinkled in. And ordinarily, I would have had no problem with that. But I have to say here, in this particular case, I was severely disappointed. Now, the movie wasn't all bad. I don't want to sit here and pretend like it was a film without merit. The writing was serviceable. The acting was really good by all parties. And the directing was actually really good. And from a story standpoint, I did like the depiction of the relationship between Dunst's Lee and Kaylee Spaney's Jesse, which, despite this film again being billed as a war epic, was the real heart of the movie. Lee, the seasoned journo who reluctantly takes Jesse under her wing at the beginning of the film and basically walks her through their perilous road trip from New York to D.C. in an effort to get an interview with the President of the United States before the Western forces, a high-powered militia made up of soldiers from, of all places, Texas and California, with absolutely no explanation of how that came to be, mind you, arrive to remove him by force. And over the course of the film, we watch Lee become more and more affected by the life she's lived as a war journalist and the things she's seen through her lens, the lens of her camera. And, at the same time, we see Jesse grow immensely from a frightened girl at the beginning of the film with a camera into what she, I'm sure, would call an actual war photographer. Now, that being said, I hated how this movie started, and I really hated how the movie ended. Now, let me kind of clarify. The opening scene of the film was perfect. It's exactly what I would have done. It's the way the opening scene was handled that left a lot to be desired, at least in my opinion. And I knew the moment that I saw it, and that feeling just became more and more exacerbated as the film dragged on. But I knew I had been had about 20 minutes in when almost nothing of large-scale consequence in the storyline had taken place. I personally think the filmmakers relied a little too heavily on shock value through Lee's flashbacks and through the handful of violent sequences that are sprinkled throughout the film, and no doubt in an effort to convince you that you're watching a war epic. But so much of what appears to be happening goes unexplained. Like, why are there 3 military factions instead of just 2? Per the story, 2 was all you needed. And while due to our current political climate, I can understand why Florida and Texas might secede from the Union, but what the hell was California's problem? We're never told. And the Florida Alliance, other than trying to convince the Carolinas to join them, is essentially a non-factor in this story, which makes me wonder why they were included in the first place. Now here, again, what I probably would have done was had Texas and Florida, and maybe from a historical standpoint, even South Carolina, secede from the Union and be on the same side. That would have made more sense. Now, I have been seeing some reports that state that, Garland chose California and Texas, a historically blue state and a historically red state, so that the film would not be seen as him trying to pit Republicans against Democrats and have conservatives essentially, staging a coup. And therefore, it feels like he's picking a political side. But again, if you're going to do that, I've got no issue with you kind of trying to stay neutral, but then you're going to have to give somebody some context. What exactly happened that made the situation get to the point where it was? And there just was none of that to be had in this film. And the ending of the film is maybe what I had the biggest issue with. After the run-in with Jesse Plemons' character, who doesn't even have a name in the film, and he shoots one of the non-American journos, the ones who appeared completely out of the blue a few scenes before, simply so the writers could kill one of them off to prove to you just how serious this war we don't really get to see is. The group goes on to D.C., even though they also lose Sammy, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson, who dies while trying to rescue them, because shit happens, right? And I was pretty positive that he wouldn't be the last journo to get got before the film cut to black. But honestly, I thought it would be Joel, with him being the last man standing in the group and all, totally expendable these days in films, right? And that's where, to A24's credit, we do actually get a pretty impressive set piece, especially given the film's budget, wherein the Western forces have indeed reached D.C. and ultimately the White House, and, I kid you not, are looking for the president not to capture him, but to execute him. I'm like, what the hell kind of war is this supposed to be, and who decided the rules of engagement here? It just nothing like I've ever seen before, but I digress. Now, it's at this point that all of a sudden, as the bullets fly and shells explode all over the place, that Lee starts losing her shit. A seasoned war photographer who had every chance to turn around over the course of this journey is literally breaking down in front of Jessie, her little protege, in real time. And that's when I absolutely knew that Lee was the one that was going to die. It was just a matter of how. And it's the how and what came after that truly pissed me off. Because Lee was killed in a White House hallway when Jessie, reckless as she is, pops out into that hallway in between the Western forces and what's left of the Secret Service, causing Lee to have to tackle her in order to keep her herself from being shot. Lee then stands up, and I am not kidding you, Jessie immediately picks up her camera and points it up at her, almost like she knew what would happen next, and takes a freaking picture as Lee gets the back of her head caved in by a member of the Secret Service returning fire in an effort to protect the president. And then, to add insult to injury, after Lee is killed, Jessie and Joel, completely unbothered, follow the Western forces into a room where the president is being essentially captured at that point. And it's at this point that Joel asks the president for a quote before Jessie takes the picture of the Western forces executing the president of the United States. And I'm not going to lie to you, in that moment I asked myself, what the fuck did I just watch? Now, overall, I give this film a 65%, or a 6.5 if you're thinking IMDb score. I believe this movie could have been great without all the cheap tricks, none more irritating than the title of the movie convincing moviegoers that they were in for a war epic. I just think that Garland could have made a similar movie without the nonsensical and almost non-existent war as the backdrop. There have been plenty other movies that were movies about war that focused on something other than the war, but they weren't named after the war. And that's where the disconnect comes in, because I feel like calling the film Civil War is going to draw an audience to the theater that is going to be expecting to see something that they're not going to, and that's what I have the issue with. Now, this was a film in its own way that, highlighted the bravery of conflict journalists, and that's absolutely something that I can admire. Having said that, as a film, this movie is deeply flawed, mostly because the concept at large was not fleshed out nearly enough. And, as I've always said, the beginning of your film should tell the audience what the film's about. I think Garland did a decent enough job at that. So, check. But the end of the film should tell the audience why you made the film in the first place, and I left the theater confused about what I was supposed to take from the ending, especially in a micro sense. I understand people going, well, it's a cautionary tale that if we don't get our stuff together as a country, this is where we could end up. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ending of the film as it pertains to the characters. Now, if this had been a situation where Jessie, in her recklessness and her naivete about what she was getting into, eventually got someone killed, and she was deeply impacted by that fact. Like maybe she sat in the hallway next to Lee's dead body, feeling the weight of what had just happened, as the Western forces, went on down the hallway, captured the president, and won the war. Then, maybe that's something I could have gotten on board with. But what Garland seemed to be saying here is that shit happens. And I don't know, for a film with the title Civil War, that just seemed deeply superficial to me. But what do you guys think? Have you seen Civil War yet? If you have, did you find that it was the movie you indeed thought you were going to see? Or were you ultimately disappointed with the story? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.